Then for question number 8, first you want to take the 2, substitute it into the f function. So take 16 times 2 squared. Go ahead and type that in your calculator. So everyone take 16 times 2 squared. See what you get. And then whatever answer you get, you're going to substitute that into G. So I'm going to let you all figure that part out. Is first figure out what this number is, and then take this number and substitute it into your G function. So you're going to type in the square root of 4 times that number, and that's the answer that you're going to put in for number 8. For question number 9, the first thing you have to do is solve the equation. So we're going to, you have to isolate the square root. So the first thing you want to do is subtract 7 from both sides. And then to clear your fraction, you're going to multiply by 5. How do you get rid of the square root? The opposite would be to square both sides. So you end up with x minus 4 equals 25, and then you can finish it from there. For question number 10, you need to square both sides first. When you square the left side, it gets rid of the square root. So now we're going to set it equal to 0. Now you want to keep this positive, because if you keep this positive, you can factor it. So I'm going to add 45 and subtract the 14x. And that's going to give us negative 14x plus 45. Go ahead and factor that down. You need to find two numbers that multiply to be 45 but add to negative 14. So go ahead and factor that. So the numbers would be negative 9x and negative 5x. So that factors down to x minus 9 and x minus 5. So set both of those equal to 0. And both of these are valid, because remember that when you have a square root, it has to equal something positive. And because we have two positive solutions, when I substitute these in, it's going to equal a positive number. So you might want to have on your cheat sheet that the square root has to equal a positive number. So if you are solving an equation and you get down to a point where it says a square root equals something negative, that means that that's not a solution. So both of these are valid. So we would say 9 and 5 are both valid. For question number 11, we have an equation for a production model, and it says that N is the number of units, and what we're trying to do is find A, and they told us that N is 240 and T is 10. So let's write our equation out. 240 equals a times the square root of 25 times 4. So figure out what is 25 times 4. So 25 times 4 is 100. And the square root of 100 is 10. So 24 equals a times 10. Divide both sides by 10. And you get that a is 24. So 24 would be your answer to number 11. When you simplify, anytime you see a negative, make sure you take that out. So you have to separate that out. What is the square root of negative 1? I. And what's the square root of 100? 10. So the answer is 10I. So definitely have on your cheat sheet that you take out the negative, and the square root of negative 1 is I. So we're going to do the same thing with number 14, our last one. The first thing I'm going to do is break these apart into negative 1 times 3, and then negative 1 times 24. You have to take out that negative. You cannot multiply with a negative underneath the square root. So the square root of negative 1 is I. So these two become I. So I have I times I. And now take a calculator and multiply 3 times 24. So let's take 3 times 24. $72. All right, build a cake with your 72. So I'm going to divide that by 2. So I have a pair of 3s and a pair of 2s that gets to come out. So all together I have a 6. So 6 can come out. And then this 2 that did not have a partner has to stay. Okay, but we didn't do anything with this I times I. So I times I is equal to I squared. And does anybody remember what I squared is equal to? I squared equals negative 1. So these are your 2 rules that you need to have on your cheat sheet. So this I times I is really I squared. So what we really have here is 6 times negative 1 times the square root of 2. So my final answer, what you want to type in the first box, you want to type in a negative 6, because the 6 becomes negative because of the I squared. And underneath the square root in the second box is a 2.